Hello, everyone, and welcome to the November edition of Crinium's LinkedIn Lives of our leading female executive panel discussions. Now, if this is your first time joining us, welcome. I'd love to see you jump in the comments. Let us know where you're tuning in from today. Each month, we meet with a fantastic group of female executives to talk about a hot topic. And this month, we are talking about whether data is viewed as a reward in your organization or a risk, or potentially somewhere in the middle. And to do just that, we have a wonderful panel lined up who I will bring onto stage right now. Welcome, everyone. Welcome this evening. And well, I say this evening, it's this evening for me here in the UK, but we have a range of geos on the call, which is always fantastic. So, is data viewed as a risk or reward is the main question today. But if you have your questions, please send them in via the comment section and I will do my best to make sure we get those answered for you as well. But for now, let's do a quick round of introductions. Minna, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, please.
Thanks, Kat, and great to be here again. My name is Minna Karha. I'm a data strategy consultant in a company called Solita. We operate in Finland and in the Nordic countries, and we help our customers by combining technology, human insight, and data.
Thank you, Minna. Maritza, great to see you.
Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you and all the other ladies. I am the head of data at BNP Paribas Personal Finance South Africa. We're also known as RCS Group here.
Thank you, Maritza. Kulani, great to see you.
Always. So, hi, everyone. I'm Kulani Likotsi from South Africa, and I head up the data management and data governance capability for one of the top 4 banks in Africa.
Thank you, Kulani. Great to see you. And last but certainly not least for today's panel, Richa, a long time no see, but great to have you back on the panel. How's it going?
Yeah, thank you. It's always fun to be here. Thanks for having me, and nice to meet you all, the other ladies. My name is Richa. I work for a company called Tecton. And for those of you who don't know Tecton, we're a growing startup and we focus on the feature platform component of MLOps. So everyone these days is aware of machine learning, data science, but taking it to production and managing the pipelines, data pipelines specifically, is a very arduous task. So that is the field I'm in. And I lead a team that is mostly focused on developing the product and understanding what the data scientists, machine learning engineers are needing these days. So yeah, again, thanks for having me here, Catherine.
Oh, no, pleasure. Absolute pleasure. I love that we have a range of industries on the call. We've got a range of locations on the call. It should make for an interesting conversation for sure. So let's dive in. Is data viewed as a risk in your organization or a reward, or somewhere perhaps in the middle of that is where we will go from first. Maritza, what's it viewed as in your organization?
So I think in general, in banking and financial services, it's definitely both. And we have this conflict between data innovation and data governance in banking and financial services. I think it's the same for every industry, but I think particularly for banking because it's such a highly legislated industry. So we have to balance those two things, which it's really difficult because on the one hand, you have to comply to a whole set of legislation, but at the same time, and particularly here in South Africa, the banking industry is incredibly competitive. So the big banks in South Africa, there's about 5 of them, compete with startups. We've got a lot of fintechs in South Africa, in South and in Africa, but also we've got sort of new entrants into the industry, like retailers and digital banks, as well as even medical aid providers that's got banking licenses. So it's really, really competitive. We don't always have the rich data that these other types of organizations have about their customers. So we have to innovate and we have to transform through data, but at the same time, we have to be safe with that data. So we have to do the right thing in the right way. And it's really tough to find that balance.
Oh, absolutely. And it's interesting to me that we have another one of South Africa's big banks on the call, as well as a startup. So it'd be great to get the kind of perspectives as well. But really interesting that you set the scene there, Maritza, that actually it's kind of a macro scale from an industry perspective, but then also from your organization, kind of what the appetite is there as well. Well, Kulani, I think it only seems right that I come to you next, being in the same market. What are you seeing in terms of that risk versus reward type approach?
Yeah. So just like Maritza, it's finding the balance between the two. Working for a banking industry, there's always the need to generate more or data collection. And in collecting that data, you always use that information for trend analysis and also gathering the insights of where are the new customers that we then need to draw up. What are the new products that we then need to put in place? So data in that aspect, it becomes that the reward that we're looking for. But at the same time, that finding that balance from a risk perspective, where now you also then need to take into account what are the controls that we're then putting into place? What are those mitigating security measures that we then put in, taking into account, like banks becomes the target for any ransomware and cybersecurity. And also just taking into account the privacy considerations. Because we are highly regulated, now there's the privacy considerations that you then need to take into account, but also taking into how we then collectively work together. It's partnering with the risk committees. So you get the risk partners then coming in saying that at the moment we want to deploy a new product or a campaign, bringing the data specialists, the security, the information risk, the privacy and the compliance guys into one room and say, what are the potential risks that we can have with rolling out the specific product? And that way, internally, there's that balance of the risk aspect of just making sure that we've got the right set of controls, partnering with the people who are the deep specialists within that fraternity to then guard against any potential exposures, taking into account the zero appetite for any reputational and financial risk exposures.
Yeah, it's really interesting you mentioned about the partnering with the risk titles. In fact, I just got back from Amsterdam. We had our annual Chief Data Analytics Officer Europe event just last week in Amsterdam. It was a wonderful event. And I was on a panel and, you know me having to stir up a bit of a discussion. I put the point over, do we think that data leader roles will exist in, say, 10, 20 years time in there? And I kind of compared it to the Chief Internet Officer, what used to be back in the day and now no longer exists. And one of the panelists quite rightly put back to me, well, the chief risk officer exists and yet risk is, part and parcel of everyone's function. So it was an interesting discussion. So it's interesting here that this is very much where data and risk do have that collaboration and cohesion together to have that informed discussion, that both parties can bring their expertise, their knowledge, their understanding of, what the organization is risking from a data perspective. So thank you for bringing that in, Kulani. Richa, I think it only makes sense I come to you, as Maritza mentioned about startups being very competitive in the market. And I think that's fair to say across industry, regardless of what that might be. What's your thoughts when you look at the market and you see whether data is perceived as more of a reward or more of a risk?
Yeah. So where I come from, my entire company is based on making data happen and making data happen easily. But we also have to make sure that the companies that we work with, and there's a wide gamut of companies. We have companies from healthcare that have HIPAA compliance, and we have folks from fintech and real retail, etc. So we have to make sure that we understand all of these guiding principles and make sure, like our infrastructure, make sure our practices, etc., when we're audited, are put into place. But the TLDR of the argument is, at least for us, data is gold. Data is reward. Is how you treat it, how you manage it is the only thing that is going to mitigate all the risks that come with it. And I myself talk to customers day in, day out, and they're like, hey, just by using the platform, using the features, the right set of features that go into the model, we've been able to up the accuracy 3% or something. And then that's huge. That translates into huge ROI, and it's all backed by data. So you just can't hide from the fact that data, if used in the right way, is a massive reward.
I love that. That's so on brand for this discussion, because it can be that you just make this incremental change with data, and actually the impact is massive for organizations. It doesn't need to be. I think there's been this kind of slow kind of dialogue within the data community that I've certainly been having in the podcast and various other formats, where it doesn't need to be that you come in and make this huge millions and millions of pound change for data to be kind of important. It can actually be very small, impactful case studies that actually then build into the bigger projects. And it's certainly a very interesting way of looking at it as a reward. So thank you for that. Minna, what's your thoughts when you're thinking reward versus risk? Where do you land?
Yeah, maybe just to bring a new, a bit of a different perspective to discussion. I fully agree with the ladies that, and especially looking at our customers, most of the organizations do consider data as a reward rather than risk, of course, managing the risks accordingly. But lately I've been working on a couple of projects around ecosystems and data, where the vision would be to exchange and share data between companies and innovate with that. And there I see that it's not necessarily that much yet considered as a reward, or somehow organizations seem to be a bit reluctant on sharing data within those ecosystems and kind of innovate and build something new together.
And I'm going to stick with you on this, Minna. How much of it comes through misinformation of data and in terms of what you're actually allowed to share? Because I feel like with the increase in GDPR, PIPEDA, CPA, all of these regulations that have been brought in, I feel like people are now really paranoid about sharing data, and the instant reaction is to say, no, can't do that, when in actual fact, there's so much you can do, and there's obviously lots of safety measures put in place. How much do you think that impacts the culture of data being a reward, and it's actually kind of gone into this risk mindset? Because, you know, there's a bit more of a lay understanding of what can go wrong if you share the wrong data with the wrong people.
I think it should be fairly established, like practices, what kind of data can be shared in terms of GDPR or other regulations. I think it's mainly the reluctance of not sharing data is based on myths rather than those kind of legal or other things. So I think it's mostly because it's interesting that in general, companies say that, yeah, I'm interested in we would like to share our data, and we are interested in using other companies' data. But then when it starts to require some sort of activities, investing time and money to make that happen, then the reluctance comes in, and well, it's not that important for us. We don't really want to do it, and I think that's rather myths, or for some reason they don't yet see the opportunities and the value.
Yeah, almost slips down the to-do list as soon as it becomes kind of more of a resource input. Yeah, that's certainly something that I've been hearing. I'm seeing a few nods around the panel there, that it is a case that the value has to be so much to warrant that input, for sure. Now, joining us on the panel is our resident governance expert, Morgan. Great to see you. If you wouldn't mind giving us a quick introduction and then dive straight in with your take on whether, in your opinion, whether data is viewed more as a risk or a reward.
There's the mute button. No, I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I apologize for dropping in a bit late. So I'm Morgan Templer, and I'm the Chief Data Evangelist for Get Governed. And I really feel like data is viewed today as it's viewed as a liability, and it's really been a bunch of really interesting conversations that I've had recently, where data science and model ops and the AI and machine learning that we're putting into place, that all is viewed as value. But none of that actually works unless your data is good, unless you've got your data catalog, unless you've got good data quality. And the investment in building out that capability within organizations is largely ignored. And it doesn't have to be this big giant, we're going to have a huge transformation and build everything new and implement all these new tools. It can be a grassroots effort where every single data steward and everyone who uses data is a data steward. It can be a grassroots effort where we can build it up over time. You find something wrong, who owns that data? Tell them it's wrong. Don't just fix it, because then it's not fixed in the source system. And so it's really a culture thing. It's really about having a data culture and helping people understand that if we're going to have good data outcomes and we're going to look at data as an asset and it rewards our company, we've all got to take the ownership of making it better.
Amazing. Thank you, Morgan. We've had Lazola has written in here. Thank you, Laz. Great to hear from you. I don't think it's so much a question as such, but more of a statement. Robust data security frameworks should be developed and implemented with the assistance of CISOs to lower the potential risks so that the business can derive sufficient value from the data to reap the full rewards. And that is an angle we have yet to touch on, actually, is the CISO element. We spoke about kind of the chief risk officer collaborating in, but then from the, or CISO, depending on what, I forget, we've got a global audience here, CISO, information security officer. How are you partnering with those currently? How much of that discussion is it kind of just the trio of risk, data, and CISO? Is there anyone else in the mix? What does that look like for you, Maritza? I'll come to you first for that one.
Definitely. I agree with Lazola's statement, and also with what Morgan said around data is all of our responsibility and data protection is all of our responsibility. I'm going to add the DPO, the data protection officer, to that community that we have to collaborate with. No one on their own can drive data ethics, data protection, data security in an organization. I think the important thing is that you have to be very intentional about those partnerships. You can't just expect them to happen. So you have to have the right forums in place. We, for example, have a data governance forum, and the standing members are the DPO, the CDO, myself, the CISO, everyone in IT security, and representatives from the business, because it's a partnership between IT and the business as well. And ownership has to sit in both IT and the business. I think Kulani touched on that earlier as well. So you have to be absolutely intentional about your partnerships, put the right forums in place, put the right controls in place. It's not going to happen just on its own magically.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that you add in the data protection officer, actually, because I did an interview very soon, which will be published in the new year, that the CDO was now the DPO as well, and they combined that title. And I'm interested to see in kind of, I think it's more small organizations where that becomes kind of a collective and kind of the implications of that. But yeah, it's interesting you kind of put that in the kind of collection of people you're talking about the risk versus reward discussion. Minna, how about for you when it comes to who's involved in those decisions? Is the CISO sitting front and center for many people that you're chatting with?
They are sitting, or let's say, on the side, so they are consulted, but they are not usually in the core of what we do. What I've seen, like, being very practical and helpful is having some kind of established practices, sort of checklists, even than whenever there is a new idea of using data for a new business case, new use case, there would be a practice to go through certain questions and think that, is this use case, are these applicable for this use case? And if yes, then it means that you go to the protection officer or equal role and kind of have a more deep talk with them, or if it's something that can be done without having that talk.
I just picture a nice pretty flow chart for that. I doubt it's that pretty in reality, but that's how I picture it for sure. Kulani, how about yourself when it comes to those decisions and kind of trying to make that risk versus reward decision? Who's involved in that? Are the CISOs present, data protection officers, anyone else?
So we also have our compliance partners. So over and above the risk fraternity, we've got compliance. We've got the privacy team that also then comes in and provides their views. But we've seen the evolving of one of our capabilities sitting under data governance, where they've actually become the first line risk. And here it's where the team becomes the center of it all, on the basis of, because they've got much more exposure to what is data security, what is the security control and the risk controls and the privacy and regulation. They've seen that team as the center. So within business, because my team is sitting in business, we're the first ones before they deploy. We will be able to check out on who are the other individuals that we then collectively need to go and rope in from group. So we've also got the data privacy team very close to us, over and above the IT security officers, and also compliance from a regulatory perspective.
Thank you so much, Kulani. Morgan, is there anyone that gets left out of these discussions, in your opinion, that you would really love to see more people have, being included in the whether the particular projects or activities or data sets are risky or rewarding to that organization?
Well, really, I think that the finance department gets left out quite often. They often will start their own set of governance because they aren't involved deeply in the overall governance of the organization. And really, they're the ones who are going to help set the financial marker of, is this a benefit or is this a risk? And so getting the finance team more involved, having them join with you and evaluate what you're working on, putting an asset number against the work, an asset number against the data. I think that gets left out. And I think that step gets left out because there isn't a solid framework for how you value data. There are lots of people who evangelize about it, but to actually value data is done differently at almost every company. And I find that if we could get to a more standard way of saying, this much data quality is this cost, or, if we've got poor outcomes, it is this risk, we would do better. But there is no forum to create that.
Oh, that's such a great point. A little bit of behind the scenes here. When I'm hosting these sessions, I also do my own live video mixing, which is so when you're seeing people pop up. And just as I made you bigger then, Morgan, as you mentioned, finance get left out, pretty much everyone else on the call went, huh, and none of the audience got to see that reaction, which I just thought I'd give a bit of a behind the scenes there, because I think that is one of the things that, as you explained it, we all went, that makes sense. But I think naturally, perhaps finance doesn't spring to mind in the same way that CISOs and the risk officers kind of spring to mind as people who do need to be sat at the table. But as you mentioned, by placing a dollar figure on the risk and placing it on the quality, I think that is something that really, really adds to this value discussion that we've been having for so long now, and actually in turbulent times that we're going to be seeing over the next few months and years. This is going to be something that I think is going to be non-negotiable for so many people. And we just had a comment come in here. 100% Morgan, to package data as an asset, we need to go a step further and value it. Thank you so much for getting involved there. Richa, for you, is there anyone else being left out, or is that what you're seeing as well with the CISOs, the risks, privacy and finance?
Yeah, I would say one persona that's actually left out are the actual folks who are in the midst of creating these models and deploying them and having to maintain them, the data science practitioners. So we also spend quite a bit of time, not just like understanding how do we govern the data and treat it the right way, but also when these models are deployed and harnessing the true value of MLOps, what does it take for us to preemptively alert that, hey, your model or your data is stale, the performance is degrading, and you need to like retrain your models or kick off a circuit breaker so that your model does not go into production. So there's a lot of statistical efforts that go back into creating these capabilities to detect drift and model performance that's like going down the hill, etc. So that's we pay a lot of attention in building those capabilities by talking to those data science practitioners as well.
Yeah. So from what I'm hearing, then really we need quite a lot of people sat around the table to have this discussion and have a really holistic picture of what is a reward and what is a risk. Now we've got just about 5 minutes left of today's panel discussion. They always go so quick, and we've got 5 panelists, so I'm going to give you a minute each. When it comes to this discussion, what is your top tips for people who are perhaps having challenges in their organization of determining and communicating the risky sides to data, but then also the rewarding sides to data and establishing the value to it? What's some of the sage advice that you can give to our audience here today? Kulani, I'll start with you.
So I think there's awareness that there needs to be created from a data perspective. It's one, data handling, data sharing, data protection, data privacy considerations that we then need to enable our business and also some of our technical team. And secondly, it's just ensuring that you partner with the right individuals or the right SMEs that will ensure that you take away the risk and then generate that cost perspective to generate the business value and the financial value.
Amazing, Kulani. Thanks for joining us today. Morgan, how about yourself? What sage advice can you give to our audience?
I think the big thing is we need to be focusing on data culture. Data literacy is not working from the point of view of everyone getting involved, but having data as one of the words that is a verb that we use whenever we're talking about making change. As part of change management, data governance needs to be a component. So changing the culture to be a data-driven culture is really critical and really important.
Thank you, Morgan. Minna, how about for yourself?
I would say that keeping the value, business value and purpose always in mind when thinking about the risks and the rewards. So kind of always focusing, why do we collect this data and how, what is the business value that we want to achieve with it, and then what are the related possible risks and capabilities that need to be built or strengthened or taken into account.
Fantastic, thank you. Richa, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say for any organization, even from my previous experiences, to solve the problem and to really use data as a reward, it's a trifecta of a problem. And I call it as people, process, and technology. So every company needs to be able to hire the right set of folks who understand what exactly needs to be put into place for data literacy, for the right checks and balances to be put into place. And that leads into the right set of processes, because every department, well, if they start having like different standards and rules put into place, then the data can get messy very, very quickly. And last but not the least, technology plays a huge role. How do you make sure that your pipelines are working correctly, they're complete, they're succeeding on time, so that way, like, the business decision making is not getting interrupted? That also needs to be paid a very close attention. So there's no one silver bullet to solving the problem. It needs to be a joined effort to bring everything together.
Amazing, thank you. And then last but not least, Maritza.
Okay, I agree with everything everyone said, and the only thing I can add is to say that, as far as you possibly can, embed data security, data ethics, data governance, data protection into all of your processes, because that does give you kind of a little bit more capacity for your analytics audience to focus on the value. They have to think about the risk side as well, but if you have it built into the processes, they have more time to think about the risk and to think about the value and to focus there. So create a really safe environment for people to innovate.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Maritza. And I'm very, very jealous that both yourself and Kulani will actually see each other tomorrow at our
That's
CDO
right,
Africa
yes.
event.
Can't wait.
So fantastic. I love that we get to do the in-person side as well as the virtual side nowadays. So safe flight to you, Maritza, and I hope to see lots of selfies from Johannesburg tomorrow on LinkedIn. But as always, thank you to our panelists for joining us for what has been a great discussion.
Thank you.
Amazing. And just like that, November is wrapped up for the leading female executive panel discussion. We have just one more in December to come, and obviously that will feature a nice wrap up of the year for 2022, looking into 2023. So we hope you can join us for that. For now, we still have a few days left open of our nominations for the top 100, our global innovators in data analytics list top 100 data platform, and nominate either information, please do. And that is everything for us today. So stay well, stay safe, and we'll see you next time.
Wanting to meet with other senior executives in the data and analytics space? In an environment that is created for connection and inspiration? Then why not join one of our in-person conferences? We have events all over the world, and you can find out the ones closest to you by visiting coriniumintelligence.com/events.